Carriers are having to answer the question, do I want to be this technology company? Do I want to be this distribution company and be an underwriter? I do see some of that playing out in this ecosystem approach. There's role for good distributors and there's role for good underwriters. Very few companies in my experience can do both. Hi, this is Bryan Davis, leader of VIU by Hub at Hub International, and this is the future of insurance.
Bryan, it's great to sit down with you. And like I was saying before we recorded, anytime I get to talk to another Bryan with a Y, it's like, the pain of having to get your name tag reprinted over and over again.
For sure.
Living with people misspelling your names in email. But thank you for sitting down.
Absolutely. Good to be with you today.
We share plenty of more things in common and interests and stuff beyond just a weird spelling for a first name. But I would love for you to just give people kind of your background and, how did you come to be where you're at? And then I want to understand more about VIU because it's something, maybe people have heard of. They've probably heard of Hub, but I want to understand VIU in particular. So tell us about you.
Absolutely. My story is probably very similar. Nobody thought they would end up in insurance, and then 20 plus years, here you are still. Over 20 years, started off in underwriting, a lot of different things in that journey, underwriting, product development, product management. I would say that's my 10,000 hours of practice is building products, underwriting products, understanding
on the carrier side?
On the carrier side, primarily on the carrier side. Definitely led call centers, sales and distribution, strategy and planning over many different types of companies. Spent 10 years with Nationwide, was the chief strategy officer for Wayne over at USAA for a brief period of time. Led independent agent distribution companies, direct to consumer companies, exclusive agent companies. So I have a good kind of generalist, unique, broad perspective on the customer. First time on the broker side of things, Hub approached me and was pretty serious about the questions of what role does a broker play and what's playing out from a technology standpoint. That was in the middle of COVID-19. So I was hired without an in-person interview, which a lot of folks were in that period of time. And since that moment in 2020, September to now, there was no vision for VIU by Hub, but entrepreneurial spirit of Hub, here is VIU by Hub. So it's been a great marriage, so to speak, out the gate, and we've been able to recruit some good talent from the carrier side to match that sales muscle from distribution side, and we like the place that it's in right now.
Yeah. Well, so I don't want to steal your thunder in telling us about what VIU really is and what you're trying to achieve. But when I first saw about it, it sort of struck me as taking me back to my first days in the industry where like the internet was new. And I've told the story a gazillion times, so apologies to people who've heard it that many times. But I was like warned on my first day in the industry, like, have you heard of this internet thing?
Mm-hmm.
Agents and brokers are going to be gone in like 5 minutes. And first of all, like this internet thing, like that's how long ago this was that we didn't just say the internet or
right.
But that's been like this war cry for decades. And it's not been true. Things have changed, but I've been really curious about, well, when you talk about enabling, you talk about changing the way commerce happens and information flows and the power shifts that go on with that. If I'm a brokerage, how do I think about that? And how do I want to respond? And we've had a few of these kind of transformational moments from a distribution standpoint, from an internet standpoint. And so when I first saw about VIU, I was like, this is an interesting strategic position for Hub to be taking as they think about what does distribution look like and how do people get insurance and all that kind of stuff. I'd love to hear kind of from the horse's mouth, like what is it you're trying to achieve and why? Like what drove it?
Yeah. In its simplest form, we're trying to be a good broker for consumers. And I say that when I talk about VIU, when you look at the overarching industry for the last 20 years, a lot of investment in digital. But if you do like a more of an anthropological, sociological look at that, primarily by carriers and fintech providers, distribution has been very much a laggard in digital investment. And over that 20 years, a very interesting thing has happened, Bryan. our consumers have become more underinsured.
Yeah.
In that, the Swiss Re Institute, if you look at that research, the insurance protection gap from 2000 to 2020 doubled. So that's in spite of all of the access to improved technology and effortless experiences. So basically, customers are the ultimate judge and jury of who gets their business or not. But what has happened in that last 20 years, if a customer wanted ease and fast quotes and effortless experiences, then it was a direct to carrier play. If you look at the growth of direct writers, you see kind of two or three stand out: Geico, Progressive, USAA, for a different reason, and then it's a big drop off after that. But if you look at the independent agent distribution channel, it didn't fall off the map like everybody thought independent agents would be out of business. There's a steady growth of independent agent distribution market share. So if you can extract from that, consumers want what independent agents bring, but they also want effortless experiences that direct carriers brought. So the genesis for VIU is our customers don't have to make that sacrifice. They can get effortless experience and get the things that only an independent broker can bring. VIU at its core is about being a good broker. And we think that's a strong value prop for what customers want.
Yeah. I think what you're getting at is a really interesting point around this trade-off that we took as sort of law, is like, if you want to have simple digital experience, then you're gonna go direct, and you're gonna look at all the direct options yourself and be your own broker, from this limited population of options. And there, aggregators have come along and tried it and largely not really done much. I mean, it wasn't just agents are going to go away. It's going to be these digital aggregators. And by and large, most of them have folded. That many have started. There's still some in some particular pockets or niches of the market, but it did feel like, well, either you give up the market access and the breadth and the research and the knowledge that you have to tap into if you need it, and the guidance, and you do all the work yourself, or you can't do it yourself, or you don't want to spend the time, or you don't know that you're getting the best deal or the right coverage. So then you're going to have to fall back to a less modern, easy, whatever you want to call it, kind of interaction. And it was this perceived trade-off that we had to make. And the thing is, we don't.
Yeah. And our mentality on that is, you can have both, but also our mentality is it doesn't stop after purchase. And that's a big difference than what we're trying to do and what some others do. It's like, hey, let me get you a fast quote, multiple companies, and then off to the company you go, and don't ever call me again for anything. Well, we feel that's not the value prop of a independent agent. Customers,
it's an aggregator model.
Correct. Right. So, but there are components of what an aggregator does that is good. So we were in a position at Hub, #1 personalized broker in the world, that we didn't have to focus on building only a shiny object and spending a lot of money on marketing to get new customers to flip the app and sell it. Right. We were about building a fundamentally sound, good brokerage that gives the best of what's out there from an insurtech perspective. So I like to say, hey, we are a broker powered by insurtech and fintech, not an insurtech player. So customers want lightning fast quotes. You should give them lightning fast quotes. Customers want effortless experience around the bind. You should give them an effortless experience around the bind. We feel that is actually table stakes from a customer perspective. Where we saw some opportunity is, once you do bind with a carrier, instead of saying off to the carrier you go, hey, we should be giving advice and counsel and neutrality across the totality of the value chain. And the reason why a lot of independent agents or aggregators did that, because just a few years ago wasn't economically feasible to do that. But the advancements in cloud computing, because of COVID-19, has made things like open API architecture possible. So you can interact with customers across the totality of their needs and bring that brokerage advice and neutrality to them. And
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going from the wishbone to RPOs, man, on the side of the things you can do. Just imagine Internet of Things engagement.
Yeah.
From a broker standpoint. So that's how we think about it. Not because we thought about it, but because that's what the customer said they wanted. When we talk to customers and you ask them, hey, what's the value of a broker or agent? Well, 90% of them don't know the difference between a broker or an agent, even though there is. So when you use those words, Bryan, they don't know the difference. But when you say, hey, do you want neutrality? Do you want choice?
Yeah.
The hands went off the chart. So that's our product, is delivering that across the value chain.
I would say the agent broker difference, shockingly, almost no one at a carrier knows the difference either. From the conversations I've had people who say like, and we work with agents. I was like, really? Because I've seen some of the lists, and those are brokers as far as I know. I'm like, well,
Right.
yeah, I mean, an agent broker. I'm like, no.
Right.
It's actually legally a totally different thing, who you're representing and the compensation structure. And they're different.
They're different, right? And so, and they're different how you approach the customer too.
Yeah.
So that's why I like to say, VIU is a lot of things. We can get into all of the technology that it brings, the different type of partners we have.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's about being a good broker and delivering that in a modern way that interjects with how you live your life versus forcing you to operate on how we want you to operate. That's the VIU by Hub, a fresh perspective. That's what.
And I do want to dig into the technology, because what I want to understand is, what does it take to do that? And people could look from the outside and be like, well, it's Hub, so they probably just have all the Hub systems and just put a shiny skin on it and popped it out to the public. I have a feeling it wasn't that simple, and there was no like, oh, just do this, and like, oh, 15 minutes later. I imagine there's quite a bit that had to be achieved to do that. Like, what does it take to stand something like this up? Because it's sort of an insurtech built within a traditional player with all the resources and assets. I mean, I keep pointing out, like, why does it have to be legacy versus insurtech? What if a legacy player with all of those things that you get to bring to a table could stand something up? And that's sort of what I see going on here.
Yeah, and first you got to have the right expertise who knows what the hell they're doing. And after being on the carrier side, knowing how painful it is integrating with legacy systems and how much more cost you actually put into the systems if you try to do that. I've always tried to get carriers to think about new PaaS environments, completely different platforms. And that's hard to do on the carrier side because of, renewal books and laws in individual states. As a broker, you're kind of unconstrained from that kind of policy admin constraint that most carriers had. So VIU is a completely new PaaS environment. We don't touch any legacy systems for a hub. So we've made a big investment into, we might touch like Epic or something like that, some back office, but 99% of VIU is a complete new data infrastructure, headless API, built in the cloud with Azure. I mean, completely how, if you're starting a new company, how would you build this? Complete separate engineering team, complete agile Scrum team, complete new business solutions team. So we copy Silicon Valley for that structure. But the art is remembering you're not this insurtech shiny object. We do all that to enable a good brokerage experience. So it really requires expertise to know how to come build it. If you put a traditional salesperson, no knock on traditional sales only folks, I've seen those mistakes. Hey, let me use Epic for this, and let me use the legacy this for that, and put a good UX on top of that. And that's just a dumpster fire waiting to happen for your customers. So we built this completely new in a new environment.
I think that's a good nuance you just added to that dumpster fire, though, is a lot of times when we do that, it meets our needs and we stop there, and it creates all of these complications for the customer that, had you built it in the way that you're talking about, you recognize, well, from a customer experience, a customer needs standpoint, that's actually what has to dictate what we do. And a lot of times, like, the traditional approach and putting skins on it, like, works, and it's stuff we know and we're comfortable with, but it just replicates all of the old ways of working that were frustrating before, and so we don't. Maybe that's why a lot of them have sort of fizzled.
Yeah, I mean, and there were some misses inside of Hub before, right? With how to do this. Let's take a technology only lens and do this, or let's take a sales lens and do that. What you really need is a good generalist lens, somebody who knows the broad nature of the business and also can apply it to a technology sense. I mean, my partner in crime is Seth McAllister, our CTO, did his yin and yang, right? So, but he knows it's about enabling the business and having a clarity around business strategy. So before we coded any set of Python code, we knew who our Annie was. Annie is our build persona. And so we built towards an external consumer, but it's not our target consumer. It is how we built VIU. That's how we picked up the digital natives. That's how we picked up the digital immigrants. We came up with a new category of digital refugees, people who were forced into digital because of COVID-19. So as much as we talk about, VIU is this new hip thing, our first customer was a 72-year-old customer from Texas who found us when we launched VIU. 72. We didn't build for a 72-year-old. We built for more of a hybrid Zennial kind of person. But the 72-year-old is now interacting with us on Zoom and Teams. He's like, man, I didn't know I can interact with my broker that way. And he likes it. So that's how we went about the technology philosophy. And how we're going to run that is, we're going to not be IBM at the end of the day. So we're not going to build this giant technology organization. We're going to have just enough SEALs and implement a distributed agile approach. At the end of the day, we want to be a broker, not technology organization. And that's a lot that's playing out in the market too, Brian, is carriers are having to answer the question, do I want to be this technology company? Do I want to be this distribution company and be an underwriter? It's kind of hard to do all of those and pay claims. So I do see some of that playing out in this ecosystem approach. Wherein, hey, there's role for good distributors and there's role for good underwriters. And very few companies in my experience can do both very well.
So I want to ask about that a little bit on the talent side is, I've heard both ends of the spectrum. It's got to be no insurance people because that's just going to box you in. It's got to be all insurance people because otherwise you're going to miss all the regulations and other things that matter, like the difference between an agent and broker that plenty of insurance people don't know. And then kind of the nirvana is like, no, you need a mix and you need people who can work together. And like you said, yin and yang, like, can you bring them together? What is did everyone come? I mean, you were new, but did everyone come over from Hub, or is it a mix of people? And did you pull from outside the industry? What's kind of the makeup of the organization?
Yeah, I like to say you have the what side and you have the how, right? So on the what, we brought in more industry carrier talent because you needed that muscle for like business program management execution, right? Agile agility from a business ways of work. What is a average earned premium? What are these underwriting rules that carrier X is putting on? So you do need, I like to say, industry expertise that's been rebirthed out of the matrix. They understand it, but they're not constrained to the thinking of legacy. So that's our what side. They're doing design. Here's what the product is going to look like. And then you have the how side where that's not traditional Hub. That's more, folks from .com industries, digital organizations who we brought in to a modern day broker that know how to run 2-week sprints. They understand a Scrum and they understand, all of the agile lingo we use, all the way to even our engineering folks. They understand a little bit about insurance. So think of it as a generalist in the middle between the what and the how, but a future looking forward generalist that is very adaptable to technology, very adaptable to not this vertical kind of operating model, but a horizontal operating model. But
Yeah.
when you get out on the far extremes, we do have a little bit of specialization, but for the most part, we're 80% generalists, very hybrid oriented.
And market segment wise, other than 72-year-old Texans, what are the lines of business? Like what's the path for this? Where are you starting at, and is there an expansion plan, or kind of how do you think about the product offering?
Yeah, from a strategic makeup, we don't put a product label on it. We are more persona based. We say, hey, VIU is intended for any consumer who wants to primarily, key adverb, interact in a omni-channel, digital oriented manner.
Yeah.
And so the reason why we don't necessarily start putting a product on it, because we're seeing some other products that traditionally would be, no, that's not digital, but now a high net worth person does have some digital attributes at some places in the value chain, particularly around service. Now, if I'm talking to my carrier partners and you force me to put a product label on it, it is your core personal lines, non-high net worth.
Yeah.
Think life, boats, all of that. And then also your micro commercial as well. So things that we know went digital 15 to 20 years ago is our primary scope. But all of the technology and back office infrastructure is applicable to intermediated products. So a high net worth customer, for example, might be placed through relationship networks out in the field. But once they are placed, they want the same servicing capabilities that we have on VIU, right? Yeah. So is that a high net worth customer or is it a VIU customer, right? Yeah. It's a hybrid and their needs change depending on what they're doing. So we like to think of it as be as flexible and adaptable as possible. But if you want a simple answer, VIU is core personal lines, transactional personal lines, and micro commercial.
Okay, but it does span personal and commercial. It's not one or the other. And I know like Hub more broadly touches all that, goes into specialty lines as well. So I know as a brokerage, there's a pretty wide array of offerings.
Yeah.
Where is not just where is VIU headed, but where do you think distribution is headed? And I mean, I imagine it's something tied to what you're doing, but like, what's your outlook for this? And do you think that there's a kind of a pivot point or a time frame where it's like, look, the industry will change, but it's going to take X number of years. And so when I talk about the future, it's 15 years out or 10 or whatever. Like, what do you see the path ahead when it comes to distribution in particular?
Yeah, we fundamentally, based on what's playing out, especially from a technology standpoint, customer trends, carrier trends, we believe distribution is the most critical part of the insurance value chain. And we think distribution is ultimately going to lead to a unified industry network, especially large brokers who digitize their experience. Because of the element of neutrality in choice, distributors are, as an entity, particularly brokers, are empowered in a very good place for what's playing out from a technology standpoint. Distribution aggregation, we do think, is a future trend that large brokers like Hub, who have invested in the technology, can offer more value to traditional M&As who can't afford to build out what VIU has, right? This is Ferrari technology that we would build in the carriers. And so we think and we are seeing that play out with our acquisition space. We're now presenting VIU as an option for potential acquisitions, and that has accelerated acquisitions. We do think human producers are still going to be relevant in complex placed products. VIU is not for middle market commercial battery acid plants that have a risk management component to them, but the technology to empower that intermediary producer to operate with a potential CEO or a risk manager from a firm is the way of the future. The fundamentals are still the same though, bringing choice and bringing neutrality across the totality of the value chain. And that opportunity is, there's a huge void between underwriters, carriers, and consumers. There's this whole block of fintechs and insurtechs that individually have been trying to connect the two. It's a huge fragmented kind of world. And so the reason why we think a distributor is a good thesis to bring that connection in a more concerted business case manner that makes sense to a consumer is because of the role of a broker. So there's opportunities for insurtechs who were trying to do this on their own, have a good product. Where do I put this? Do I sell this to a consumer? Do I sell this to a hub? Do I sell it to a carrier? Well, VIU is enabled to partner across these other types of partners to minimize that friction between an underwriter, which we're not desiring to be an underwriter, and the consumer. So we think distribution is the future of that thesis. And there are others who believe the same in the communities that I'm talking to.
Yeah. Well, I've had a few people from the distribution side on the show over the years, and obviously bullish on channel-based distribution. But what I haven't heard is the same level of kind of the sky is falling, it's all over, from anyone really, like whether you're in distribution or not. And I think it just took us a while to wake up to embracing technology a bit, embracing flexibility, and recognizing like it doesn't have to be the end, but you got to engage a little bit differently. And so, I'm excited to see what Hub has been doing with VIU as that potential of like, look, it's I think a more right-sized, appropriate way to look at what the customer actually needed, rather than here's who we are and this is the face we can put on it, but really it's the same thing. It's like, well, eventually customers will see through that. And certainly in COVID, like that forced a lot of the X-ray vision to be like, you're not really doing what I needed you to do. You're just calling it something, and I don't have time for that.
Yeah, I think you have to earn the permission from customers to do more for them and with them.
Yeah.
When you look at Apple, which, we all said this, but I really believe this is more my view for VIU than anything. It's more Apple-like, iOS-like, wherein, when you first got your, I don't know if you're a Droid or Apple customer, but when you first got your, when you first got your Apple product, your first one, you didn't imagine 10 years later you would be a 4 or 5 Apple household. Right? And the watch comes, and all of a sudden you're like, man, I can do all of these things with it. It wasn't like, man, let me sign up for the iOS so I can do all of these things. It kind of came. It was a subtle permission by delivering value to you that got you deeper relationships. So industry, we always have wanted deeper relationships with the customer. So how do you get deeper relationships? Well, you got to earn permission from the customer to get more deeper with them. And how do you do that? Well, come into the customer's world versus forcing the customer to come into your world. And I tell people, if you want to understand what I'm talking about, just listen to a call center call at one of the carriers. I mean, you're like, how's this customer? I mean, you see why our customers have the perceived value for insurance. It's like, oh, that's a lesser claims payment because you had actual cash value endorsement versus full replacement costs. Customer like, what the hell is an actual cash value endorsement? Like, why would you want the customer to find that out in a claims experience? So I think you got to flip that a little bit and really understand what the customer is saying and deliver that in a subtle way to get permission to do more with them. That's how we think about it.
Yeah. No, I think that's really well said. Bryan, it's great. It's great to hear about what you're building, but also the reason behind it. What you're trying to achieve. I think that's always more important than the specifics, because we can always change things and build them a little differently, but it's like, why are we doing this in the first place? Where is it we see things going, and why are we pushing there? So thank you for coming on and for sharing a bit of that.
You bet. Like I said, thank you for what you're doing. And I say this on my LinkedIn page, and I really believe it. I'm passionate about this industry evolving from within versus it being disrupted from without. And I think we're very close to evolving as an industry. I think it's going to take a cross-functional perspective on distribution, carriers, and technology to really do it. And you see that kind of playing out here with some recent trends. So I thank you for what you're doing to help that cause.
Thank you to Bryan for sitting down and sharing a bit about not just what they're doing at VIU, but what led to it, what they're trying to achieve, and kind of that vision of where things are going. It's something I brought up a lot on this show, the whole like doomsday picture for agents and brokers that I got when I started out. And I know a lot of people have heard that throughout time, and there's been very strong divisions on which side of the fence you fall and whether that's the case. But I don't think it's as binary. And obviously those original predictions when the internet was first starting out did not play out, but there has been change. And it's interesting to see a large established player and how they're looking at navigating things in a new generation, a new period of time and standards and expectations, not just post-COVID, but where things were heading anyway. I think it really did speed things up. And like his example around that customer down in Texas, a guy in his 70s, our presumptions about who would do what in what way, they're not really valid anymore. So many things have changed for lots of different customers, not just younger customers or more digitally savvy customers. People's great grandparents have been doing FaceTime and Zoom and all kinds of stuff the past few years, and it's not necessarily going away. The world has changed. Very excited to watch what happens with VIU by Hub and where they take it. It's cool to see someone who is, is rich in the industry and worked across the different functions representing this move. I think it's great when people who come from insurance and are dyed in the wool and really understand what makes for true success in the industry are leading the charge on where we can go. So very excited for Bryan and the team at VIU, and wish them all the best of luck. Something I will certainly be watching. I hope this was interesting for all of you. This whole distribution question, whether you're direct or you sell through agents or brokers, or you are an agent and broker, or you're in a totally different part of the puzzle. If you're part of insurance, distribution and what's going on with it and the way it's changing matters to you, because ultimately it ends up touching all of us in different places. So we need to keep an eye on it and think about, well, what does that mean? How do I need to interact with it? Are my services relevant for the changes in that space? Just need to see what's going on and stay abreast of it. So thank you to Bryan for sharing with everyone today. I hope this was interesting. Make sure you come back for next episode. Best way to do that is to subscribe to the show here on whatever platform you're watching this on, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, doesn't matter. Podcast is available everywhere. So check it out, come back, and I will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.